And the ramifications of the Last Dance documentary continue to reverberate around Michael Jordan, including now former Chicago Bull Craig Hodges coming out and trying to put Michael Jordan on full blast for his comments calling Scottie Pippen selfish. And Craig Hodges upset, claiming that Jordan made these comments about joining the Chicago Bulls and there being a cocaine circus, when in reality, Jordan just responded to a question about an article that said that the Bulls, before Jordan got there, were a cocaine circus. Jordan answered the documentarian's question. Craig Hodges is blaming Michael Jordan for that. Charles Barkley has talked in the past 24, 48 hours about the rift between he and Michael Jordan, how they went from being best friends and brothers to not speaking to each other ever since Charles Barkley was critical of Michael Jordan as the general manager of the Charlotte Bobcats. And last but not least, we've seen Michael Jordan during this documentary talk about his hate for Isaiah Thomas. We've seen in the documentary Michael Jordan talk about living in this bubble. And it leads to the question, would you really want to be like Mike? There was obviously the famous Be Like Mike commercial. And watching this documentary and watching the fallout from this documentary and getting this unique insight into what it was like to be like Mike, I want to ask Marcellus and Jim Jackson, and Marcellus, get us rolling here. Would you want to be like Mike? Would you want to be Michael Jordan?
Nah. I never wanted to be like Mike, even in the heyday. Even when he was popping in the cultural sense and him being an icon at his greatest powers, his greatest heights, I never wanted to be like Mike for many reasons, including probably the core reason of I'm not into doing the identity swap and trading places with someone of this world. Being Marcellus Wiley has been pretty good to me, just to say that. And when you start thinking about this mental experiment and exercise of swapping with someone else, I hope y'all know y'all have to take the good with the bad. And the flip side of the coin of being like Mike, not so attractive. The gambling obviously is an issue. He went through a divorce. More importantly, what we're talking about right now is the fact that he may have his boys, but he certainly has a long list of ex-boys that I'm not in support of in terms of what this documentary is highlighting. It's highlighting that this is a guy who has this insatiable desire to compete at all costs, and at all costs to all human sacrifice and all human beings in his existence. There are too many people who are sitting there suffering because Michael Jordan was in the quest to do one thing. And that's just not the way I want to get down. I'm more into win-win propositions in terms of how I connect with other people, and it just doesn't seem like Michael Jordan was into that. Kudos to his success and his record. I'm sure he doesn't want to swap places with me either. But if you want to ask me if I want to be like Mike, never did, never will.
Interesting you say that, Marcellus, too. And I say this. When you were growing up, who did you kind of idolize from a football perspective?
John Elway and Eric Dickerson.
And because when you were younger, you didn't really have a clue about who they were personality-wise. You just kind of saw what you saw on that Sunday or in interviews. So that kind of gave you something to admire, right?
Yep, their game as well. The game led it. Yep.
Right. So you're answering the question now, be like Mike, or never wanted to be like Mike from a basketball player. I'm 49 years old. I can answer that question a lot differently now than I could when I was 15, 16 years old. I grew up in the Michael Jordan era. Come Fly With Me. All the stuff that Michael Jordan was all about, I loved it because there was only certain things I knew about Mike at the time. When I grew up, it was first Dr. J because he had the afro. When I was in the 6th grade, 5th grade, I wanted to be like Dr. J. Then I loved Magic. But Mike was something different at the time. And again, it's not like growing up in this era with LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. You know everything pretty much about them because of social media. Back then, you didn't know. You didn't know some of the intricate details in Michael Jordan's life like you would happen to know now about some of our stars. what I love about the documentary, which I've always known because I had the opportunity to be around the Bulls in those mid-'90s when they were making their championship run, was that Mike wasn't perfect. Mike had his flaws. Mike had, his grudges. Mike had his pettiness, like we all do. It's just now being exposed to this point to a lot of people, especially young people who really don't know the lineage of Michael Jordan. They know highlights, but they don't know the deep details. They don't know back when, the whole China thing came up about Nike in regards to sweatshops and Nike making shoes, and Mike didn't say anything about it at the time. We all talked about Craig Hodges, you did, in regards to going to the White House in '91, when Craig really wanted to talk to George Bush, I think, about some issues in the black community. Asked Michael about it. Michael was like, nah, I'm good on that. So I would take aspects. I love him as a basketball player. Would I love to have his skill set? You better believe it. Would I love to have the Jordan brand? You better believe it. Would I love to have his bank account? You damn Skippy, I would. But there are other aspects of it that I can put to the side because my background, I grew up differently. I see things differently. And at an older age, I think different. So I would like to have some aspects, but like he said, you got to be in my shoes for years to understand what it is to be like Mike.
You got to take it all, though, Jimmy. You got to take it all. You can't be over here piecemealing it.
You asked me the question.
Listen, I do want to say this because I covered part of Jim's college career. And so there are people that are too young that will think I'm crazy when I say this. But there was a time when Jim was at Ohio State where people's imagination went to, oh, my God, Jim Jackson might be another version of Michael Jordan. And I say this in all seriousness. Jim had the size. Jim has the looks. He has the whole thing. And as an athlete and as a player, he had a chance to be a great, great NBA player in the mold of a Michael Jordan. And so I'm just wondering, Jim, as you look at all the price that comes along with being Michael Jordan and being that great of a basketball player, when you look at it now with 49-year-old eyes, would you have liked to have been that great of a basketball player and deal with all the complications that go along with that I think are being exposed here from this Last Dance documentary?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I would deal with it because with success and greatness comes the other side of it. When my son was, 7th, 8th grade year, the 7th or the 8th grade, I told him, being my son it's a catch-22. You can't have the good without the bad. You can't separate the two. So the sooner you figure out how to deal with the adversity, the expectations, the backstabbing, the better off you'll be in life. I would take it in a heartbeat because being at the top of your profession is what we all strive for. And there's, some things that come along with that. And we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm divorced. I messed up. I've done some things in the past, but I've learned along the way through my journey. And I think Mike has also. But to go back to your original point, undoubtedly, I'd love to have his career being probably the greatest to ever step on the court and grace us with his talent.
Marcellus, let me ask you a similar question in terms of let's keep it to football. If you could have been one of the greatest football players of all time, reached a Lawrence Taylor level, a Tom Brady level, a Peyton Manning, and kind of live in that fishbowl world that the greats of the greats live in, would you have chosen that? Do you think you would have been able to deal with the complications that go along with that?
Oh, absolutely, I would have chosen that. I mean, I think every time you went out there and practice and mental preparation, let alone on the actual playing field, that was your choice every time to be that great. And when you have your shortcomings, you also understand where you are in the stratosphere. You deal with that reality. But it's funny that we're going to ask a question like, do I want all of his success without his failures? And we know that that's an incomplete equation. You got to take it all. But certainly I would have been able to handle what comes with a higher altitude of success. I desired it. I landed where I landed, and I had to adjust to that reality. certainly far from ground zero, but certainly far from the Mount Rushmore or the GOAT status that we're talking about with Michael Jordan. But look, I'm a guy in college. If you look at, I can show you pictures. Every single poster in my dorm room was damn near Michael Jordan. Part of it was the consumerism. He was flooding the streets, and everybody thought it was cool to be like Mike, and I thought it was cool to see Mike. But really, I was a beneficiary of Michael Jordan's greatness. 100 pounds ago, I used to get modeling gigs, no lie, in New York City. I got pictures. 100 pounds ago, my little muscles, 6'5", 100 pounds ago again, reminding you that. Bald head, tall, dark. Oh, man. Everything that Michael Jordan couldn't get was looking at me like, I take this carbon copy of it for a second there. So, look, who didn't want to be like Mike in some respects, but in totality, nah, I'm good.
The question I have watching Last Chance, Doc, looking at Michael Jordan on TV, talking about, I hate Isaiah Thomas. You find out the anger he played with throughout his career. I'm starting to question, like, is Michael Jordan happy? Is he happy? Because I think we all dream about being as wealthy, being as successful, being as revered as Michael Jordan. But I'm literally leaving this Last Dance documentary wondering if Michael Jordan is happy. Jim, you go first, then Marcellus, you have the final word.
I mean, and that's a relative term too, being happy, okay? Especially with Michael Jordan, because of everything that he's accomplished. And we always talk about this on this show. Your childhood sets you up for things that happen to you when you're an adult. He had a lot of competition with his brother. His whole thing was beating his brother. Some things he had to deal with when he was younger. How much does that play into his competitive nature to always be the best? You would look at Michael Jordan. This is, I think, a misinterpretation of people all the time to say, you got all this money, why wouldn't you be happy? It's still something out there that maybe you didn't accomplish, something that nags at you as an athlete, especially Michael Jordan being the greatest, okay? Was it the articles at the time when people were nitpicking at things? Was it Isaiah Thomas? Was it Clyde Drexler comparison? I don't know what it is, but it's always something there. And it does seem like Michael, whether it's, he hasn't done what he needed to do in Charlotte right now. You can see some of it come out in his Hall of Fame speech. He has everything in the world, so why complain? But again, it goes back to the personality, who and what made him very special is that his relentless drive to be the best at what he could be. And right now, maybe post his career, in particular, ownership perspective, he hasn't reached that pinnacle yet. And maybe that's what we see a lot of times with kind of the unhappiness or uneasiness in these interviews that are starting to come out a little bit more, in the Last Dance.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to assess because we all wear our happiness different. But that said, I love what Jim is talking about in terms of when you're always on this quest to conquer, to compete, when is enough enough? My therapist talks about this a lot. When you just are always in this attaining mode, I need the next. You get a big house, I need a bigger house. I get one car, I need two cars. If you always are talking about the next, then you're never going to be completely satisfied or, more importantly, fulfilled. So I look at Michael Jordan through those liquor store eyes that we all see when he looks in that camera. It is wearing a lot of joy, a lot of pain, and a lot of relief. And I think he really has this unique concoction of all of those emotions. But he used to be in protected airspace, and literally, and no pun intended, protected, restricted airspace. You cannot touch the GOAT because he lived in so many of our imaginations. Pre-social media, it was just folklore. And we asked the question, you asked it, Jason, will this documentary make us look at Michael Jordan differently? Absolutely. Better or worse? Worse. One, you can see the flaws in Jordan that before they weren't so tangent, they weren't right there. And two, you also start to see who he was surrounded by, not only in his team atmosphere, but in competition. To a player is writing me, DMing me, commenting, seeing it on Twitter. Who are these dudes he played against? And comparing the eras. So I think there are now people taking shots at Jordan that before this documentary, never had the audacity to do that.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. And be sure to check out more of the best clips from Speak For Yourself, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.